Hello and welcome to Food for You and the Planet podcast, brought to you by Healthy Plan Eat Online Farmers Market. I'm Dr. Rosemary Ostfeld. Together, we'll hear from leaders in environmental science, agriculture, medicine, nutrition, entrepreneurship, and more. Subscribe to hear the latest in healthy and sustainable food solutions. Today's episode features Matthew Dillon, co-CEO of the Organic Trade Association. Matthew was raised in an agricultural family and community in Nebraska and has held diverse roles in organic food and farming, working from seed to shelf. He headed Abundant Life Seed, one of the first certified seed companies in the U.S., and founded Organic Seed Alliance. He worked for over 10 years at Clif Bar Company in several roles, including Vice President of Impact and Government Affairs. He most recently served as Chief Sustainability Officer for organic poultry producer Farmer Focus. As co-CEO for Organic Trade Association, Matthew oversees the organization's public relations, policy agenda, member engagement, and fundraising. Thank you so much for being here today, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Rosemary. Really excited to talk.
Awesome. So, what is the Organic Trade Association and what type of work does it do?
So, I'll start out first by explaining a trade association because I don't know that many folks know really what trade associations are at a high level is organizations that are trying to solve complex problems or create incredible opportunity that no one single business can. And so it's a way for businesses from, in our case, farm all the way to retailers to come together and collaborate in pre-competitive ways uh, in order to move their sector forward. And in our case, our sector is the organic sector. And so what we're trying to do as a mission is to grow and protect the organic sector, protect that integrity, the consumer trust, protect from misinformation and greenwashing of other claims, while we grow opportunity, especially here in North America. Um, and we do that with a robust membership, as I said, like we have farmers, we have input providers, seed and fertility providers, we have aggregators, ingredient manufacturers, uh, brands, brokers, and retailers, and all the consultants in between. And it's everything from dairy and fiber and produce to dietary supplements and snacks. Like we're unusual as a trade association in that we have all of that under a single umbrella instead of just being focused on, say, cattle. Like there's National Cattlemen's Association, right? We have it all. We have a beef task force that's about to kick off. So we got cattle, and then we also have plant protein companies. So the whole thing.
Amazing. How did the Organic Trade Association get started and how has it evolved over the years?
Well, I've been around for a long time, but I wasn't around for the start of the Organic Trade Association. My understanding, and when I talk to the folks who were around, I always get a little bit of it wrong. So I'm trying to be humble in how I answer this. What what I think was occurring was that in 1985, organic was quickly growing. There was more and more interest in it. It was primarily a lot of local, regional producers and some manufacturers, even creating consumer packaged goods that realized that the way organic rules were set up with each state or different regions having different certifications, what happened in Oregon was different than California, was different than Vermont, that wasn't working and that we needed a unified, harmonized set of standards so that organic meant the same thing in Vermont as it meant in Hawaii, right? And that wasn't the case in 1985. So they came together to start working on that uniform standard that eventually became the National Organic Program of the USDA and the federal law, the Organic Food and Production Act. And really, these were our pioneers in the movement who were working on something that had been around for a long time. There have always been farmers who were trying to grow food in more harmony with nature and with fewer inputs and more care for like really growing soil, not just growing crops. Um, but these folks, the early days of the trade association, wanted to expand that out and have it grow beyond it being just a niche and become more of the norm.
So you've touched on some of this, but why do you feel organic agriculture is important?
So I think I'll answer personally first, and then I'll answer more professionally. As I think personal bias is something that we should be honest about. I have personal bias. I grew up in a conventional farm family in Nebraska. Corn, soybeans, alfalfa, small grains, and cattle. And at the time I was growing up, the farm economy was collapsing. We lost 16,000 family farms in 2 years. We also had some of the highest rates of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in the Platte River Valley in the world, and incredibly high rates of Parkinson's. My father died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at 53. He was a healthy guy, took great care of himself, lived a good lifestyle, and yet he was one of the many people that I knew in our communities getting sick. Our well water tasted positive for atrazine and nitrates. Um, as a kid, I walked soybean fields for money to make extra money. And you walk soybean fields with machetes. This is before GMO soybeans. And one summer walking soybean fields, I was crossing from one field to another through a cornfield that was taller than I was. And I got crop dusted by neurotoxins. Spent a week in the hospital, went through a massive endocrine disruption, lost 15 pounds, and I never grew again. I'm the same size now as I was when I was 12 years old. Um, Created all kinds of other challenges for me early on that might threw my emotions off because endocrine disruptions, your hormones are related to your mental health, and it was bad. I didn't there in that moment think, oh, I want to do organic, although I was introduced to organic while I was in high school by the monks that ran my high school. But those factors are to me one of the reasons that I buy organic and why they're important. I want the farmers and the farm workers, I want to underline farm workers because we don't think about them a lot, but they grow a lot of our food, take care of a lot of our animals in this country. I want them to be able to earn a living and grow food without putting themselves in so much danger of pesticide exposure. And it is dangerous in those, for especially the people working with those pesticides. Second, I want healthy rural communities that have vital farms that they're handing down to the next generation. And when they hand them down, they're handing down not just a farm business, but they're handing down natural resources to the next generation. I believe that success for the organic community isn't just about dollars and cents. Success is about succession. How are we handing off our soil, our water quality, our animal genetics, our human knowledge? How are we handing that to the next generation? That succession of resources and knowledge will really be the litmus test whether organic is successful or not. Now, I'm going to talk today with you, I know, about numbers and growth, and those do matter because they are an indicator, but qualitatively, that is why I believe organic is important, is in being able to provide a pathway for farmers to get rewarded in doing what is better for those resources, for our rural economies, and our people doing the work. That is not the main driver of why most people buy organic, which for most people, it's about the absence of things, right? The absence, which is part of it for me, but the absence of antibiotics or growth hormones in their meat or their dairy, the absence of GMOs or pesticide residues, limited pesticide residues on their food. And I respect that, and that's why people want to buy it for their kids and their families. For me, it's a bigger ecosystem. It's hard to market that first part of what I said, but to me, that's an essential part of this.
Well, it wouldn't be possible without the people who are growing the food, and it wouldn't be possible without the land, and we need to take care of everybody who's involved right from seed to the shelf. So I think, yeah, your story is incredibly powerful. Um, so for some small farms and medium farms, they may question, why should they become certified organic?
Yeah.
Some of them might be concerned about cost or some of the record keeping. So
Yeah.
what would you say to them? And yeah, what are some of the
Yeah.
challenges that some of these
So
small and medium farms face?
I will get to the why, but let's talk about those challenges for a second because certification has always been work. Like as an organic farmer, for folks who may not know, You have to keep track of basically everything you buy for your farm and use on your farm. You have to weigh and show records of like, hey, your amount of grain you've harvested to make sure like the certifier doesn't think you're bringing in grain from some outside source and that your yields are a little too high. Like it is arduous record keeping. There's costs associated with your time as well as the cost of the certification. That that challenge, that work you have to do to get certified became more complicated in the last couple of years, in part because many of us, including the Organic Trade Association, were concerned about fraud. And so in the last Farm Bill, we got something called Strengthening Organic Enforcement that was about more diligence in the certification process, including all of the transportation, logistics, and international organic trade. Unfortunately, it's been good that we got that passed, and it is starting. We're starting to see some of the fraud prevention efforts pay fruition. Unfortunately, an unintended consequence is that certifiers are more stressed out than ever and under capacity, which is hard for farmers. And two, the a basic small farmer who's got 50 head of dairy cattle or is doing, you know, 10 acres of fruit trees, and they've been doing the same thing for years and years and years, or they just raised chickens, right? And they've never had a problem with certification, never received a warning or a suspension. They're still being treated like they were a multinational trader. And it has become very burdensome. The good news is last week in the Farm Bill markup, our bipartisan effort, Republican and Democrat effort, to introduce something called right sizing organic integrity made it into the Farm Bill markup. And what that policy will do is it will allow the USDA and certifiers to apply risk and not treat every operation as if it was a giant multinational. So a smaller producer, for example, who's been growing apples in Washington State, even 200 acres, forget 20, forget maybe 20, 200 acres or more, but they're growing the same thing. They're not bringing in new genetics. So you don't have to worry about, are they buying GMO seeds? They're not, like, it's the same thing. They may only have to do an in-person certification once a year and have some virtual in between, still filling out their paperwork, still keep doing good record keeping, still assuring integrity. And I'm saying may because we have to figure out what it's going to look like. But we think we can take some of the burden and the cost away from farmers that we've been hearing like constantly. We get emails from farmers weekly concerned about the cost and the burden right now. And we want to fix that for especially the farmers who are low risk and have been doing this a long time. So that's the good news, but the burden is real. Why should they still do it? Even with the burden, and even after we eliminate the burden, there's still some cost. No one likes to do paperwork, or it's very rare that you like to do paperwork. Um, Listen, there's two main reasons. One, it's great if you have direct sales to consumers and they trust you and they know your farm. That is not the case for the majority of farmers. And it is good to be able to pass on the assurance that when you say you're organic at the farmer's market or at a local co-op, you really are. We also get complaints about that, about local people saying they have organic chickens that the person knows they're not certified. So it's good for the sector at large, as well as for your direct business to have that assurance and trust to say that, no, I am backed up by legal standards, that if I broke those standards, not only would there be potentially loss of certification or a financial penalty, but people go to jail for breaking the rules and doing interstate commerce. Like there's no other certification on the planet that has that kind of teeth and enforcement. And so that does build trust. Second, if you're certified organic, there's other opportunities for getting support, technical assistance. There can be grant funding. We're continuing to work on processing equipment grants for organic producers. We've had some success there already. And you become part of the data. And some people don't like to share data, but the reality is that if we can collect information about how organic is growing, acres on the ground, number of farmers, revenue, that allows us to get additional resources from the USDA to continue to grow your sector. And so we can't count that if you're not certified. So it's both that trust on the consumer side, that integrity, and being part of something that is a movement that we can grow together and is beyond your business. And I like to say, and we say it at the trade association all the time, we are stronger together, right? Like, yes, your individual business needs to succeed, but we also should be thinking about how we can work collaboratively to be stronger as a movement.
Absolutely. And the organic movement has been going strong for a really long time. So the more people who are involved, the
Yeah.
better. Can you tell me a little bit about the Organic Trade Association's role as a national partner for the USDA's transition to organic partnerships program and how it helps farms transition
Yeah.
to organic practices?
Yeah. I think the simple way to describe it is that OTA is a national lead on TOPP, the Transition Organic Partnership Program. We, as the national lead on TOPP, we've been helping transitioning farmers and actual already certified organic farmers sell their products now and also develop future opportunities, um, specifically with businesses that care about domestic supply chains and want to really build out that domestic capacity. And so we do that through helping both the farmers and the businesses navigate supply chain growth and how we grow the pipeline, and also actually having events, both virtual and in person, where buyers and sellers are meeting up to discuss the challenges, the efforts, how they could potentially work together. It's it's really like this opportunity that we see that organic right now, we can't meet demand domestically. We're bringing in more and more from overseas, including many things that we can grow here. We're not anti-trade. We work with international trade all the time. But we do think we should be capturing as much opportunity as possible. So I'll give you one example, Rosemary. We imported over $1 billion in organic beef last year. $1 billion in organic beef. I grew up raising cattle. We can do cattle here. There's some other structural challenges in the cattle market at large, but one, we need buyers, retailers who want to make sure they have U.S. organic cattle. The origin of livestock might matter to their consumers. And how do we work with retailers on such things? We need processing that's scale appropriate and regional appropriate because we're not going to be doing as big a herds as they do in conventional. We're not doing confinement operations like they are in conventional. And so they're smaller herds. There's a number of factors. So TOPP doesn't deal with all of that. TOPP just deals with buyers and sellers. And it's an important step in addressing that domestic challenges, which we could talk more about the domestic challenges and the international challenges if you want to do that later on. But TOPP is about just that buyer connectivity, really.
I'd love to dive into some of the challenges of domestic and international organic. Yeah, I think that's a really important topic, especially since you're mentioning that we are importing so much organic
Yeah.
products. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Trade is probably one of the most challenging topics. So, I mean, there's on multiple levels. One, like the tariffs and the uncertainty around tariffs. Do we have them? Do we not have them? Which country is getting them? That has created a lot of uncertainty in the business community, which creates challenges and costs. Businesses don't know how to build their supply chains or forecasts, and that can create inflationary pressures and drive up the cost of organic for consumers. So we don't like the chaos in trade. There are winners and losers, and there being tariffs, and there is an opportunity for domestic to benefit. But we in organic aren't ready to benefit in part because we don't have the acres on the ground. We don't have the infrastructure. So we really see capturing organic opportunity domestically requiring a couple of different streams of action. One is fraud prevention, because we do believe and have good evidence that there is fraud still coming in from overseas, even with strengthening organic enforcement. Feedstuffs, soy and corn that our animals eat, is shockingly one of our biggest imports. We import almost 80% of the soy that our birds, our poultry, our broilers, layers, um, and our dairy cattle eat in this country. 80%. While the U.S. is a net exporter of soy to the world, we're importing organic soy. And some of the numbers we're seeing from other countries don't make sense in terms of yields. There's no way a country in West Africa is going to get the same yields as a farmer in Nebraska, and yet somehow the data is not adding up. So we have evidence that's building, but OTA is working with a number of folks to come up with a holistic solution to fraud, including more testing that is risk-based testing. Organic is process-based certification, but we think more product testing is necessary. And then also there's challenges structurally, like certifiers shouldn't be accredited to do certification in the country if they can't prove in advance that they have the capacity on the ground to do the certification. It's one example. Two, bad actors are in this, they're allowed like a 12-step appeal process. They can get a suspension or a warning about revocation of their certification, be a bad actor and know it, and still stay in organic for 8, 9, 10 years while they're constantly appealing. We want to shorten that appeals process and put more teeth behind it so that fraudulent actors know that if they do get caught, they're not going to get to keep playing the game for that long of a time period. So that's one aspect, is fraud prevention. The second aspect is creating capacity domestically, and that includes both the farmers, technical assistance and support for farmers in transition, as well as that infrastructure. And that includes on-farm infrastructure as well as in processing. And I think the on-farm is something important to point out in case your audience doesn't know it. More and more organic producers and manufacturers are what we call split operations. So I don't know the numbers in Connecticut off the top of my head, but I know I'm in Nebraska and most of the Midwest. In Nebraska, 65% of organic producers also grow some conventional. So they have separate fields. They have 1,000 acres of organic over here, and they have 2,000 acres of conventional in another area, and they manage them separately, and they're in both markets. And more, that's how we're going to convert acres. That is the reality we've been seeing now for well over a decade. Same with brands. There are brands that might have 20 conventional products and 10 organic, and they're feeling it out. And as they get more success in organic, we're seeing growth and then bringing on more of their brands in that way, their products in that way. So to do that, a farmer has to have segregated infrastructure, right? You can't store your conventional corn or wheat in the same bin that you're storing your organic, right? You have to have a different bin. You have to have different processing. Sometimes, if you were doing any on-farm processing, say you're doing apples for like baby food, you have to have some of that processing in the wash stations that are segregated. In produce, wash stations, another great example. Otherwise, you have to clean them. It's a lot of hassle if you don't. And so we're working on these grants organic market development grants have already been out. $85 million went out. OTA advocated for that in the Biden administration. They went out the door. It was great for farmers and manufacturers. We are trying to authorize that now in the Farm Bill to continue. So we have bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats, bicameral, House and Senate. Bill was introduced in December called the Domestic Organic Investment Act. And that act would allow for those kinds of infrastructure investments, grants that the farmer or the business would have to put dollars into it as well, but also get grants to build that infrastructure out. And we see that as essential because if a farmer has to ship their oats 800 miles on a rail car to get them processed, or their soybeans 600 miles to get them crushed into soy meal, that's challenging economically and infrastructure wise.
Yeah, it sounds like the policy and advocacy work that the Organic Trade Association is doing is really important because you need to have the right policies in place and opportunities for people to make these changes. Otherwise, yeah, we'll kind of be stuck.
And we couldn't do that without our members, right? We are only successful in advocacy in both in regulatory and legislatively because of our members, right? Like my voice in DC doesn't mean as much as me bringing in, like a couple weeks ago, we were there with, it was a small little group, but it was like brands and farmers in there telling their stories to their senators about the impact organic has on their farm economy, on their business economy, on their hiring. We're coming out with a study later this year. It's a redo of a 2014 study that Penn State did called the Hotspot Study, and it looks at the economic impact of when you have a density of organic operations in a county. And spoiler alert, the impact is that it makes the entire county's economic vitality improve, not just the farms, but household income in general goes up, dependency on social services goes down. That's a story that Republican offices especially like, right? They're concerned about how much we're spending on social services. And we can go in and show them, hey, in your county in Pennsylvania, it's people are doing better, not just the farms, but everyone. And in fact, the chairman of the House Majority Ag Committee, G.T. Thompson, last week in Farm Bill markup, at the beginning of the markup, gave a shout out about how important organic dairies are to his county and mentioned Painterland Sisters, a yogurt brand that's taking off as an example of organic revitalizing family organic dairy farms. So I'm optimistic, Rosemary. Like the advocacy works because Painterland Sisters goes in and tells their story. And we're getting more. Listen, it would be great if politics and policy didn't help impact what we eat, but it does. Like you can make choices as a person, you can make choices as a business, but policy also impacts what we eat, and the cost of what we eat, especially. And so we are gaining momentum on both sides of the aisle in the interest in organic. I'm really happy to see that. It's better momentum than I've seen in the 30 some years that I've been doing this.
You've talked a bit about some of the growth that we're seeing in the organic market. So, yeah, what are some of the kind of trends and dynamics
Yeah.
that you're noticing now?
I'm going to give you numbers, Rosemary, before we've shared all of this with the full report. So next week, uh, our 2025 data and our 2026 market report comes out that shows growth overall and growth segment by segment. We get that data through working with these data folks who are getting your information from the retailers as well as our member surveys. And it's pretty incredible growth from 2025. So organic grew at 6.6%. It grew in the food sector 3 times as fast as grocery overall. So 3 times as fast as conventional and organic combined. 6.6% growth is incredible. We went from a $71 billion sector to a $76.6 billion sector, and we are on pace to be $100 billion in revenue a year by 2030. That's amazing. And that, I can talk about why that growth, but before I do, I'll just give you a few detailed examples. One of the major big buckets of what drove growth was actually animal protein. So consumers are interesting. Plant proteins were the hottest thing ever 4 years ago. Animal protein is having its day now. Protein in general is still strong, including plant protein. Excuse me, but animal protein, milk grew at 9.3%. Yogurt grew at 16.6%. Uh, let's see, eggs grew at 22% growth. That's big growth for organic eggs. And poultry, broilers, meat grew at around 9%. Beef grew at 44%. Like incredible growth from animal protein. But we saw it across the board. Um, you know, baby food and toddler food continues to grow. We'll go into more of those numbers next week, and we'll make sure to get your report. We think that growth is being driven by a few things. One, the MAHA movement does have impacts, and we surveyed our members about this, and about 40% believed it is having some impact. More and more people are talking about, well, how is my food grown? What is the pesticide residues? Are there growth hormones, artificial dyes? Organic is what Maha wants with voluntary regulations instead of forcing farmers to stop using X, Y, and Z. And if we're being honest, this government and the next administration, they're not going to tell farmers you can't spray glyphosate, you can't use growth hormones. They're not going to do that. They might give some incentives, and this administration's been talking about some incentives to get them to transition away. Organic is that option, voluntary to transition away and be rewarded for it. And we think consumers know that, and they're moving the needle for organic in that way. The GLP-1 drugs are also something. So consumers are, if they're spending less on junk food, they have more dollars to spend in general in their grocery budget, and they're willing to spend a bit more on healthy produce or on healthy snacks than they were spending on unhealthy snacks or not eating produce at all. And so we do see some tailwinds, I should say, from, I think I said headwinds earlier. I apologize. We are seeing some tailwinds from MAHA and GLP-1 both. And then I think just, yeah, in general, the younger demographic in our consumer research, the younger demographic of millennials and Gen Z, all of the data across incomes, across ethnicities, shows that the younger consumer prioritizes organic, recognizes and aligns with the values of organic, trusts organic, and has a willingness to pay for organic over any other certification or seal in the marketplace. And so the youth are also driving it, which is a great thing because the boomers and my generation, Generation X, our purchasing power is declining, of course, and the younger folks are gaining. And that's what we want to see is that they are our fans and they believe, and we gotta keep them believing by keep improving organic in trust and in credibility.
So there is a big rise in the regenerative agriculture movement
Yeah,
amongst young people too, being interested in this, kind of regenerative buzzword. So
yeah,
how do you perceive the differences between regenerative agriculture and organic and
yeah,
some of the challenges of this kind of new term being introduced when really
yeah.
organic has kind of been the bread and butter for so long?
So I'll answer your question, maybe not in the exact order of the things you mentioned, but I think the first thing I have to say is I think sometimes the organic community, when it comes to regenerative, has a boogeyman under the bed syndrome. And what I mean by the boogeyman under the bed syndrome is that if you're on LinkedIn or you're at a food conference with investors, um, they're all talking about regenerative, right? Everyone's looking for the latest, greatest thing. Retailers, like everyone's always in marketing, everyone's looking for the latest new shiny thing. And organic isn't as shiny as it was 20, 30 years ago, right? And so when we talked to, for example, Amazon a few years back about they didn't have organic in their climate smart pledge. We asked them why. And their answer wasn't, oh, because you're not climate smart. Their answer was, we think it's kind of like not that new and interesting anymore. It's like, well, that has nothing to do with climate. Let's talk about the sustainability benefits. And we got them to add organic, thankfully. But that's the nature of the business community is what's the shiniest new object we can invest in and promote. Yes, some consumers and some farmers are also talking about it, but consumer research year after year shows that consumers are not aware of regenerative and they're not willing to pay. So in our consumer research, we do regenerative organic certified, different regenerative, conventional regenerative certifications, and we made up a certification last year and asked consumers to talk about what they knew about all of these certifications, including organic, and then their willingness to pay. And consumers said they knew more about our made up certification and had a similar willingness to pay as they did for conventional regenerative certifications. Consumers are not there yet. That doesn't mean that they're not going to get there, but regenerative has been around for at least 10 years. I gave my first interview on the threat of regenerative in 2015. So 11 years ago. And the needle has moved, but even at Expo last week, it feels like it's slowing down. Like it's not, in part of slowing down, and this gets to answering part of your question, it's slowing down because regenerative means different things to different people. Sometimes it's used in what we call romance language. Someone just calls their practices regenerative, their business. I'm a regenerative business. I'm a regenerative consultant. And there's no definition for what that means. Now, practices are what are important. What are the practices farmers and businesses are using? It doesn't all have to be about perfect definitions. It's hard to perfectly define organic. There's rules and regulations and standards that define it, but it's not easy. The concern is there's so many people saying different things about regenerative that it's already starting to cause infighting, mudslinging, greenwashing concerns. And there are folks, investors, who are starting to get nervous that it's not picking up. And I think it's only going to get worse. I mean, sustainable, there was a whole sustainable certification movement, sustainable food certification movement back in the early 2000s that also never really made it because what does sustainable mean? It means different things. So I don't know that regenerative is going away. I'm not saying it is. There's some pretty good traction amongst some of the certifications. I think regenerative organic certified shows the best. And with them, they have organic as their middle name. So their foundation of organic, the trust of organic. And then they're building on that trust of organic with some additional things. We welcome our members to be organic first and foremost and build whatever they want on top. We have brands that are building equitable food initiative, for example, is an initiative that helps fair pay for farm workers and fair treatment of farm workers. One of our members, Once Upon a Farm, is paying their farmers extra for that certification. Like that's an organic and, right? An organic and certification. I think there's a lot of opportunity for organic and certifications like regenerative organic. I think the conventional has a tougher time. I haven't seen the traction. So I'm not that worried. Our members do get worried. Our job is not to go out and bash conventional agriculture, including conventional regenerative, in part because we see an opportunity that if a farmer is willing to start doing more cover cropping, crop rotations, caring for their soil health, and their conventional regenerative, wonderful. That's good for the planet, first and foremost. But two, they're hopefully organic's future farmer because the farmer will learn, hey, this is pretty close to being organic. I just have to stop spraying glyphosate to do my no-till and do a few other things and do the certification. And there's a $76 billion marketplace that will reward me for this. And so rather than bashing and worrying about conventional regen, let's keep building momentum in organic. Let's talk to those farmers and those businesses and say, what do we need to do to bring you along? Because we've done the hard work of building trust and transparency. You'll never have the transparency we have. Like there's no standard that does. No one knows when a non-GMO company has committed fraud because they don't publicly have to publish that. We do in organic. There's a website you can go to and look at farmers who've gotten warnings or suspensions, businesses that have warning or suspensions, or a full revocation. Like it's public. We have transparency that is unequaled in the food marketplace.
That transparency is so important. And yeah, I think organic has been there all along and they have the regulative framework to be able to back that up. So I think, yeah.
As long as we keep improving, right? Like we can never rest on our laurels, right? We have to have these principles of continuous improvement. Like we can do better on mitigating risks for farmers, and we can do better on making sure farmers, whether they're domestic or foreign, are actually following the rules, and businesses are following the rules. We can keep improving our approach to our processes in the fields, our soil health. We're looking at how do we evolve organic to have more outcome measurements, right? Because people do want outcome measurements. Regulators want them in Europe. We don't, our regulators in the US don't want them at this point. Um, but California does, right? And many businesses do. Like some of the large businesses want to be able to show what they're doing on their greenhouse gases. So how do we get organic to have some of what the regenerative movement, how do we learn from regenerative, from competition, and bring in more process-based metrics in a way that doesn't overburden farmers, that farmers are rewarded. And we're working on that right now with our partners in Europe, the IFOAM International, it's an organic organization in Europe, to try to build those ideas out and do them in a way that is very farmer centric and fair, but also gives folks who want metrics and measured outcomes more of what they're looking for.
What are some of the biggest things that the Organic Trade Association is working on this year, and how can people become involved?
I've mentioned quite a few of them. I mean, domestic organic investment is huge, both whether it be helping get farmers on the ground, infrastructure, um, or the legislation to deburden some of the risk. The best way to be involved with us on advocacy, whether it be regulatory or policy, is to be a member and tell your story. And so we welcome members. Anyone who's an organic operation or sells into organic operations, consultants, even other associated businesses like retailers who might not be certified but sell organic, all sizes and scales are welcome. We're not just about big. In fact, we're really focused on emerging entrepreneurs because we want the next generation of the organic valleys or the Lundberg family farms, right? We want a Horizon and Stonyfield. We want the next generation entrepreneurs and innovative leaders on farm and in business. So that's one way. But even outside of being a member, whether you are or you're not, I think continuing to work on all of our organic IQ, talking about organic in a way that is grounded in facts and is we're myth busting, being humble about where we do need improvements, but also proud of what we've done and what we're continuing to do. We're going to be at Climate Week this year doing a full day with Food Tech, a full day dedicated to organic, in which that's the theme. Celebrate all the hard work that's been done for decades by farmers and businesses, talk about where we still have room for improvement, and then celebrate the innovation that's inspiring all of us to do better. And I would call on all of us to do that, including consumers, right? Like, as a consumer, stay informed. We have a new campaign called The Seal Makes It Simple. And you can go to the Seal Makes It Simple website and learn more about organic, do some myth busting. Our sister organization, the Organic Center, puts out the science behind organic and talks about that myth busting, raising our organic IQ. I've been working in the sector 30 years and I still feel like I don't know a lot. And I'm like, all of our staff at OTA have this goal of how do you raise your organic IQ? I'd ask all of us to do that because that will make us better ambassadors, better champions, and better in farming and business as well.
What do you see as the future of the organic agriculture movement?
I think it's strong. I mean, I think 100 billion is doable. That's the money. The real future is that succession. Like, how are we leaving things? There will be bumps in the road. We lost about 11% of organic dairy farmers in this country during the last drought, especially in New England and the Northeast. Um, that hurts. And then it hurts businesses and consumers as well who can't get enough product. So I'm not saying it's going to be a silver bullet, but I think if we can continue to see the growth we're seeing, continue to work on improving ourselves, we will have more family farms converting and staying in business. The next generation will be more interested in taking on the family farm because one, they're not going to be exposed to nasty chemicals, and two, they're going to see the opportunity and success in the family business. Um, and I think the younger generation is driving it both from the consumer all the way through the farm. I think like as long as we keep supporting youth and the diversity of the youth that are emerging in this sector, we have a really bright future. And I hope I'm around as long as I can to see it because it's one of the things that, it's sometimes hard to be optimistic in this world. I'm not a pessimist. but I'm not always a perfect optimist either. I look for my threads to hold on to. Uh, I think people wanting to be more informed in their food and care more about right now, consumers are still me thinking, what is in it for me? We're seeing some evidence in our research that consumers are moving a bit more towards we. Why is this good for, how is this good for all of us? And I am a believer that consumers can, if we educate them and we don't diminish them, sometimes marketing diminishes people to like their most buy this because if not, your kids will be at risk, right? Like fear factor. I think if we tell stories that are about the real benefits and value of organic, including that generational thinking for our planet and our family farms, more and more consumers will slowly move in that way. They'll think about, I'm buying this not just because it's what's in it for me, but the good neighbor principle. Like I'm doing this for the benefit of someone I may never meet, for a future generation that I shall never know. I'm buying this today. And I do believe that is a we we can't purchase our way into a perfect planet. We need better policy and regulatory as well. But I do believe we can evolve all of us as people who eat and wear clothing to make decisions that are better for the next generation. And that's what makes me excited is like, how do we get that next gen thinking?
Absolutely. That's definitely what we need to do so that we can have a planet that continues to thrive for as long as we can.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I just appreciate, what you do in the sector. I think that, we people focused on local and regional food systems is essential, including to grow this. Some of those people you're working with, some of the farmers you're working with today may go on and eventually make ingredients that go across state lines or get shipped out internationally. Um, you know, I think I'm a big believer that small is beautiful and big can also be beautiful and work. And we need more of the regional and small right now, especially. So just appreciative of your work and let us know what we can do for you. Grateful that you asked me to be on today. And thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Matt.